The sun is setting over the Nile, that ancient river that has witnessed countless sunsets, thousands upon thousands of them, stretching back through time. The sky above the western desert is turning those particular shades that the Egyptians knew so well. Deep orange melting into purple, the colors of the daily transformation, the colors that meant it was time to prepare for the night. And all along the river, from the delta in the north to the cataracts in the south, people are beginning their evening rituals, the same gentle preparations that have been performed for millennia. We can imagine ourselves there, perhaps 3,000 years ago, or 4, standing on the banks of the Nile as the last rays of Ra's solar bark disappear beyond the horizon. The air is beginning to cool, that blessed relief from the heat of the day that makes the Egyptian evenings so pleasant. The sounds of the day, the calls of workers, the noise of markets, the splashing of water carriers, all of these are gradually fading, replaced by the gentler sounds of evening. Families returning to their homes, lamps being lit, the soft murmur of evening prayers. In every home, from the simplest mud brick dwelling to the grandest palace, people are preparing for sleep in ways that would seem both deeply foreign and surprisingly familiar to us. Sleep, that mysterious state that claims a third of our lives, was understood by the ancient Egyptians in ways that were profoundly spiritual, deeply practical, and surprisingly sophisticated. They didn't simply lie down and close their eyes. They entered into sleep as one might enter a temple, with reverence, with preparation, with an understanding that something sacred was about to occur. The Egyptians believed that sleep was a kind of temporary death, a daily journey into another realm where the soul could wander freely, where gods might speak, where the future might be revealed. Every night, as they prepared for sleep, they were preparing for this journey, this brief separation of the soul from the body. And every morning, when they woke, it was a small resurrection, a daily rebirth that mirrored the eternal cycle of the sun itself. We can picture an Egyptian family in their home as darkness approaches. The house, built of mud bricks that have been baked hard by the sun, is simple but comfortable. The walls are thick, keeping the interior cool during the heat of the day and retaining warmth during the cooler nights. The floors are beaten earth, perhaps covered with reed mats in the more prosperous homes. And somewhere in this dwelling, usually in the most protected part of the house, are the sleeping areas, the sacred spaces where the family will spend the night. The preparation for sleep begins while there's still light to see by. Water is brought for washing, not just for cleanliness, though that was certainly important, but for ritual purification. The Egyptians understood that one should not enter the realm of sleep in an impure state. The day's dust and sweat must be washed away, but more than that, the spiritual contamination of daily life must be cleansed. We can imagine the gentle splashing of water, the soft scraping of bronze strigils against skin, the application of oils that both moisturize the skin and carry protective properties. Children are prepared for bed with special care. They're washed, their hair is combed, perhaps a protective amulet is placed around their neck or wrist. The Egyptians knew that children were particularly vulnerable during sleep, their souls not yet fully anchored to their bodies, more likely to wander too far in their dreams. Parents would whisper protective spells over their sleeping children, invoking the protection of household gods, creating invisible barriers against the demons and dangers of the night. The beds themselves, these were not the simple sleeping mats that we might imagine, at least not for those who could afford better. Egyptian beds were sophisticated pieces of furniture, carefully crafted, often beautiful, and always imbued with spiritual significance. The basic design was elegantly simple: a wooden frame with legs, often carved to resemble the legs of lions or bulls, animals whose strength would protect the sleeper. The sleeping surface might be made of woven reeds or leather strips, creating a firm but flexible support. But it's the headrest that truly distinguishes Egyptian sleeping arrangements from our own. Rather than soft pillows, the Egyptians used headrests made of wood, stone, or sometimes ivory. These might seem uncomfortable to us, these hard, curved supports for the neck, but they served multiple purposes. They kept the head elevated, which the Egyptians believed helped the breath of life flow properly through the body. They protected elaborate hairstyles from being crushed during sleep. And most importantly, they had spiritual significance, lifting the head toward the heavens, toward the realm of the gods. Each headrest was personal, often inscribed with the owner's name and protective spells. Some were simple, utilitarian objects, while others were works of art, carved with images of protective deities, inlaid with precious materials, passed down through generations as family heirlooms. The headrest was more than furniture. It was a magical object, a bridge between the waking world and the world of dreams. As darkness fell completely, oil lamps would be lit, but sparingly. Oil lamp was expensive, and most families couldn't afford to keep lamps burning all night. Besides, the Egyptians didn't fear darkness the way we might imagine. They understood it as a natural part of the cosmic cycle, the time when Ra traveled through the underworld, fighting the forces of chaos, preparing to be reborn at dawn. The darkness of night was sacred, not something to be banished, but something to be navigated with proper preparation and protection.
In the royal palaces, in the homes of the wealthy, sleeping arrangements were naturally more elaborate. The beds were larger, more ornately decorated, sometimes covered with fine linen sheets imported from the best weaving centers. The headrests might be made of precious materials, alabaster or ebony, carved by master craftsmen. Multiple lamps might burn through the night, tended by servants who moved silently through the darkened halls, ensuring that the flame never died completely. But even in these grand settings, the fundamental beliefs about sleep remained the same. Sleep was a journey, a temporary separation of the spiritual self from the physical body. Dreams were potential messages from the gods, windows into other realities, glimpses of the future. Every precaution had to be taken to ensure that this nightly journey was safe, that the soul would return to the body at dawn, that malevolent forces would be kept at bay. The Egyptians had an elaborate understanding of the different components of the human spirit, and sleep involved several of these spiritual aspects. The Ba, often depicted as a bird with a human head, was believed to leave the body during sleep, flying free through the night, perhaps visiting other realms, perhaps receiving messages from deceased relatives or the gods themselves. The Ka, the life force, remained with the body, keeping it alive while the Ba traveled. This separation was delicate, dangerous, requiring protection and proper ritual to ensure safe reunion at dawn. We can imagine the evening prayers, spoken softly in the gathering darkness. These weren't memorized recitations, but personal conversations with the gods, requests for protection, for peaceful sleep, for meaningful dreams. The god Bes, that dwarf deity with his fierce face and protective nature, was particularly invoked for bedroom protection. His image appeared on bed frames, on bedroom walls, on amulets worn during sleep. Despite his frightening appearance, or perhaps because of it, Bes was a comforting presence, a guardian who would stand watch through the night, fighting off evil spirits and nightmares. The goddess Taweret, with her hippopotamus body and protective nature, was another bedroom guardian, especially for pregnant women and new mothers. Her image might be painted on the bedroom wall or carved into the bed frame itself. These weren't decorations, they were active, magical protections. Divine presences invited into the most intimate spaces of the home. As family members settled onto their beds, adjusting their necks on the hard headrests, pulling light linen covers over themselves if the night was cool, they entered into sleep with a sense of anticipation mixed with caution. What messages might the gods send tonight? What visions might appear? What journeys might the Ba undertake? Sleep wasn't just rest, it was adventure. communication, transformation. The Egyptians distinguished between different types of dreams with remarkable sophistication. There are ordinary dreams, the random firing of a resting mind, which they recognize much as we do. But there were also significant dreams, messages from the gods of the deceased, visions of the future, warnings or guidance for important decisions. Learning to distinguish between these different types of dreams was an important skill, one that some people develop more than others. Dream interpretation was both a personal practice and a professional skill. Most people knew the basic symbols. A full river meant abundance was coming. Seeing oneself flying might mean the soul was restless. Encountering a deceased relative might be a warning or a blessing, depending on the context. But for complex or troubling dreams, one might consult a priest trained in dream interpretation. Someone who had studied the dream books, the compilations of dreams and their meanings that were kept in temple libraries. One of the most famous of these dream books has survived, written on papyrus, preserved by the dry Egyptian climate. It's organized systematically. Dreams of eating various foods, dreams of different animals, dreams of being in different places, each with its interpretation. If a man sees himself in a dream eating crocodile flesh, good, it means he will become an official. If a man sees himself in a dream with his face as a leopard, bad, it means he will rule over his townsmen. The interpretations reveal not just superstition, but a complex symbolic system, a sophisticated understanding of the language of dreams. The practice of incubation sleep, deliberately seeking divine dreams, was highly developed in ancient Egypt. Someone facing a difficult decision, suffering from illness, or seeking divine guidance might spend the night in a temple, sleeping in a special chamber near the sanctuary. This wasn't casual. It required preparation, purification, sometimes days of fasting and ritual cleansing. The supplicant would lie down on a special bed, perhaps drug-assisted with mild sedatives derived from lotus or poppy, and wait for the god to speak. The temples that specialized in dream incubation were staffed with priests who understood the protocols, who could guide the dreamer through the necessary preparations, who could interpret the dreams that came. The Temple of Imhotep in Memphis was particularly famous for healing dreams. People would travel from across Egypt to sleep there, hoping the deified architect and physician would appear in their dreams with a cure for their ailments. We can imagine the atmosphere in these dream temples at night. The dim flicker of oil lamps, the smell of incense, frankincense, and myrrh creating a heavy, dream-inducing atmosphere. The soft chanting of priests performing the evening rituals, the rustle of linen as dreamers settled onto their temporary beds, and the profound silence that would eventually fall as everyone waited, hoped for divine contact. The dreams that came in these sacred spaces were taken very seriously. They might influence major political decisions, determine the treatment for serious illnesses, guide the resolution of legal disputes. A dream received in a temple carried more weight than an ordinary bedroom dream. It was considered a direct communication from the divine realm, requiring careful interpretation and usually immediate action.
But not all dreams were welcome. The Egyptians recognized nightmares as a real danger, not just unpleasant experiences, but actual attacks by malevolent spirits or the residue of evil magic. Protection against nightmares was a serious concern, involving both magical and practical measures. Certain plants might be hung in the bedroom, their scent believed to repel evil spirits. Protective spells might be written on papyrus and placed under the headrest. Images of protective deities were essential bedroom decorations. The spell for not having nightmares appears in several magical papyri, variations on a theme of divine protection. May the good God protect me through the night. May no evil thing enter this place. May my Ba return safely to my body at dawn. May my dreams be sweet and my sleep peaceful. These weren't just words, they were magical formulas, activated by proper pronunciation, by the burning of appropriate incense, by the correct ritual gestures. Children were particularly susceptible to nightmares, their souls less firmly anchored, more vulnerable to supernatural interference. Special precautions were taken for children's sleep. Their beds might be surrounded by protective amulets, small figurines of Bes or Taweret,
ivory wands inscribed with protective spells. A lamp might be left burning in the children's room, not so much for the light as for the protective presence of the flame, a small defiance against the forces of darkness. The physical arrangement of sleeping spaces reflected both practical and spiritual considerations. Beds were typically oriented north-south, aligning the sleeper with the flow of the Nile, with the axis of the cosmos itself. The head might be slightly elevated, not just by the headrest, but by the bed's construction, sloping gently from head to foot. This orientation was believed to facilitate the flow of life force through the body, to ease the Ba's departure and return, to align the sleeper with cosmic forces. In multi-room houses, bedrooms were usually located in the most protected part of the dwelling, away from the street, shielded from noise and intrusion. The bedroom was a sanctuary, a sacred space where the most vulnerable human activity, sleep, took place. The decoration of bedrooms followed certain patterns. Protective symbols were essential: the Eye of Horus to watch over the sleeper, the Jed pillar representing stability and endurance, the Ankh symbolizing life. But there might also be scenes of natural beauty, paintings of gardens, images of the Nile with its abundant life, creating a peaceful atmosphere conducive to restful sleep. The colors were usually soft, blues and greens predominating, the colors of water and growth, of life and regeneration. Personal belongings were kept in the bedroom, stored in wooden chests or reed baskets. Clothing, jewelry, cosmetics, the intimate objects of daily life. But also magical objects, amulets, small statues of gods, papyri with protective spells. The bedroom was both practical space and spiritual sanctuary, containing everything needed for both physical comfort and supernatural protection. The evening routine varied with the seasons. During the hot summer months, sleeping might take place on the roof, where cool breezes provided relief from the stifling heat. Special summer beds, lighter, more portable, would be carried up to the flat rooftops where families would sleep under the stars. This wasn't just practical, it had spiritual dimensions too. Sleeping under the open sky brought one closer to the gods, to Nut, the sky goddess, who arched her star-spangled body over the earth each night. Winter nights required different preparations. Although Egyptian winters were mild by many standards, the desert climate could produce surprisingly cold nights. Woolen blankets, rare and valuable, might be brought out. Braziers might be lit, carefully tended to provide warmth without filling the room with smoke. The headrest might be wrapped in cloth for a bit of additional comfort against the cold. The sounds of the Egyptian night would have been distinctive. In the cities, the call of the night watchmen, making their rounds, announcing the hours. The barking of dogs, numerous in Egyptian settlements, serving as both companions and guards. The distant roar of lions from the desert edge, reminding everyone that civilization was a small island in a vast wilderness. And always, underlying everything, the sound of the Nile, the eternal river whose rhythm had governed Egyptian life for millennia. In the countryside, the night sounds were different, but no less evocative. The croaking of frogs in the irrigation channels, the rustle of wind in the date palms, the occasional bellow of a hippopotamus from the river. These weren't just background noise, they were part of the spiritual landscape of night. Each sound potentially meaningful, perhaps carrying messages from the gods or warnings of danger. The interpretation of sounds heard while falling asleep or during the night was another form of divination. An owl's call might be an omen, its meaning depending on the direction from which it came, the number of calls, the time of night. A dog howling might indicate the presence of spirits. The crack of settling wood in the house frame might be the house god expressing displeasure or warning of danger. The Egyptians lived in a world where everything was potentially meaningful, where the boundary between the mundane and the supernatural was permeable, especially at night.
dreams of the deceased were particularly significant. The Egyptians believed that the dead continued to exist in the afterlife, that they could communicate with the living, especially through dreams. A dream visitation from a deceased relative was a serious matter, requiring careful interpretation. Was the deceased asking for offerings, warning of danger, blessing an undertaking? The dreamer might need to visit the family tomb, make special offerings, perform rituals to ensure the deceased's continued well-being in the afterlife.
The relationship between sleep and death was complex and multifaceted. Sleep was called little death, and death was called the long sleep. The similarities were obvious: the prone position, the closed eyes, the absence of consciousness. But there were crucial differences. In sleep, the Ba returned dawn. In death, it journeyed permanently to the afterlife. The rituals surrounding both states reflected these parallels and distinctions. The mummification process itself was designed to create an eternal sleeper, a body prepared for the longest night, waiting for the eventual resurrection. The placement of the mummy, the orientation of the sarcophagus, the provision of headrests in the tomb, all reflected the conception of death as an extended sleep. The tomb was called the House of Eternity, and like any house, it needed a proper bedroom, properly equipped for eternal rest. Royal dreams held special significance in Egyptian society. The pharaoh's dreams were matters of state, potentially affecting the entire nation. Court dream interpreters, highly trained priests, would be summoned to analyze royal dreams, to determine their implications for policy, for military campaigns, for agricultural planning. A disturbing royal dream might trigger national rituals of protection, offerings in all the temples, special ceremonies to avert the threatened danger. The famous dream stela of Thutmose IV, carved in stone between the paws of the Great Sphinx, records how the future pharaoh fell asleep in the shadow of the monument and received a dream in which the Sphinx, embodying the sun god, promised him the throne if he would clear away the sand that had buried the monument. This dream legitimized his rule, provided divine sanction for his ascension to power. The political use of dreams, real or fabricated, was a recognized aspect of Egyptian statecraft. Queens and royal wives also received significant dreams, particularly regarding fertility and childbirth. A queen's dream of particular symbols, a lotus opening, a child emerging from the Nile, might be interpreted as predicting pregnancy or the sex of an unborn child. These dreams would be carefully recorded, their interpretations preserved in royal archives, becoming part of the official history of the dynasty. The medical understanding of sleep in ancient Egypt was surprisingly sophisticated. Egyptian physicians recognized sleep disorders, distinguished between different types of insomnia, prescribed treatments that combined practical and magical approaches. For someone who couldn't sleep, the prescription might include a special diet, avoiding certain foods that were thought to disturb sleep, consuming others that promoted rest. Lettuce was particularly recommended, its milky sap believed to have sedative properties. Herbal preparations for sleep were common: lotus petals steeped in wine, poppy seed preparations, mandrake root carefully dosed. These weren't just folk remedies, they were part of the medical pharmacopoeia, prescribed by trained physicians, prepared by skilled herbalists. The dosages were understood to be critical. Too little and there would be no effect. Too much could be dangerous, even fatal. The physical causes of sleep disturbance were recognized alongside the spiritual ones. A physician might diagnose an imbalance of bodily humors, prescribe bloodletting or purging, recommend changes in sleeping position or bedroom arrangement. But these physical treatments would be combined with magical ones: amulets to wear, spells to recite, offerings to make to appropriate gods. Egyptian medicine didn't distinguish between physical and spiritual healing. Both were necessary, complementary, inseparable. The treatment of nightmares might involve both psychological and magical approaches. The sufferer might be encouraged to talk about their dreams, to confront the fears they represented, but they would also be given protective amulets, taught defensive spells, perhaps undergo ritual purification. The recurring nightmare was seen as evidence of persistent spiritual attack, requiring serious intervention, possibly including the identification and neutralization of the human enemy who might be sending evil magic. Sleep paralysis, that terrifying state of being conscious but unable to move, was well known to the Egyptians. They attributed it to demonic attack, the presence of evil spirits pressing down on the sleeper. The prescribed defense included protective amulets placed on the chest, spells spoken before sleep, the image of Bes carved on the headboard to frighten away the attacking spirits. Modern sufferers of sleep paralysis might recognize the sensations described in ancient Egyptian texts: the feeling of pressure, the sense of evil presence, the desperate struggle to move or cry out. The timing of sleep was important. The Egyptians understood that different hours of the night had different qualities, different dangers and opportunities. The first hours after sunset were generally safe, the time for peaceful sleep. The middle hours of the night, when Ra was in the deepest part of his underworld journey, were the most dangerous, when evil spirits were most active. The hours before dawn were powerful for dreaming, when the veil between worlds was thinnest, when prophetic dreams were most likely to occur. This temporal understanding influenced when certain activities were performed. Important dreams were most likely to be remembered if the dreamer woke just before dawn, so someone seeking a prophetic dream might arrange to be awakened at that time. Protective spells were most effective if spoken at the threshold moments, as darkness fell or as dawn approached. The night was mapped temporally as well as spatially, each hour having its own character, its own possibilities and dangers. The social aspects of sleep and dreaming were significant. Dreams might be shared within the family, discussed over the morning meal, interpreted collectively. A particularly significant or puzzling dream might be taken to the village wise woman or the local priest for interpretation. Dream sharing was a form of social bonding, a way of maintaining community cohesion, of participating in collective meaning-making.
Professional dream interpreters occupied an important social niche. They might be attached to temples, serving the religious establishment, or they might be independent practitioners, serving whoever could pay their fees. Their training was extensive, requiring not just memorization of dream symbols, but understanding of psychology, of social dynamics, of the questioner's personal circumstances. A good dream interpreter was part priest, part counselor, part fortune teller. The tools of the dream interpreter's trade included reference texts, the dream books we've mentioned, but also divination instruments. Casting lots might determine which of several possible interpretations was correct. The position of the stars at the time of the dream might influence its meaning. The dreamer's birth date, their patron deity, their profession, all might affect how a dream was interpreted. This wasn't arbitrary. It was a complex system, internally consistent, based on centuries of accumulated wisdom. Women often specialized in certain aspects of dream work, particularly dreams related to fertility, childbirth, children's health. The village midwife might also be the person to consult about pregnancy dreams, about the nightmares of young mothers, about the dreams that predicted the fate of newborns. This gendered division of dream expertise reflected broader social patterns, but also recognized particular forms of wisdom and experience. The economic implications of the dream industry were substantial. People paid for dream interpretations, for protective amulets, for temple incubation sessions. The production of bedroom furniture, especially headrests and decorated beds, was a specialized craft. The cultivation and preparation of sleep-inducing herbs was a recognized trade. Artists specialized in bedroom decorations, in painting the protective symbols and peaceful scenes that promoted restful sleep. The economy of sleep and dreams employed thousands, from humble amulet makers to high-ranking temple priests. The architectural evolution of Egyptian bedrooms reflected changing ideas about sleep and privacy. In the earliest periods, sleeping spaces were communal. families sleeping together in a single room. Over time, especially among the wealthy, private bedrooms became more common, reflecting both increased prosperity and evolving ideas about individual space and privacy. The royal palaces of the New Kingdom had elaborate bedroom suites, with antechambers for dressing, separate rooms for different wives, private bathroom facilities. But even in the grandest palaces, the basic requirements remained the same: protection from evil spirits, proper orientation for spiritual travel, appropriate decoration for peaceful sleep. The pharaoh's bedroom might be larger, more elaborate, filled with precious objects, but he still slept on a bed with a headrest, still required the protection of Bes and other bedroom guardians, still journeyed through the night like any other Egyptian. The climate control in bedrooms showed remarkable ingenuity. Ventilation shafts were designed to catch cooling breezes while excluding dust and insects. In some houses, water jars were placed where evaporation would cool the air. Reed screens could be moistened to create primitive air conditioning. Winter heating might involve not just braziers, but heated stones wrapped in cloth, placed in the bed to warm it before sleep. These practical measures were seamlessly integrated with spiritual practices. The cooling breeze might carry away evil influences. The warmth might strengthen the life force during sleep. The morning awakening was as ritualized as the evening retirement. The return of the Ba to the body, the reunification of the spiritual elements that had separated during sleep, this required acknowledgement, thanksgiving. The first words spoken upon waking were often a prayer of gratitude, thanking the gods for safe passage through the night, for the return of consciousness, for the gift of another day. The morning ablutions weren't just about physical cleanliness, they were about washing away the residue of night, the spiritual contamination that might have accumulated during sleep's journey. The water used might be specially prepared, infused with natron for purification, scented with oils that had protective properties. The morning toilet was a recreation of the self, a daily rebirth that mirrored the sun's emergence from the underworld. Dreams from the night would be considered in the morning light. Some would be dismissed as meaningless, the result of eating too much, drinking too much beer, or sleeping in an awkward position. Others would be recognized as significant, requiring action. A dream of flooding might prompt checking irrigation channels. A dream of a deceased relative might necessitate a visit to the tomb. A dream of illness might lead to a medical consultation. The night's experiences influence the day's activities in very practical ways. The recording of significant dreams was an important practice. In royal contexts, court scribes might keep dream journals, recording not just the dreams, but their interpretations and eventual outcomes. These records served multiple purposes. They validated the dream interpretation system when predictions came true. They provided precedents for future interpretations, and they documented divine communications for historical purposes. Some of these dream records have survived, providing us with intimate glimpses into the nighttime experiences of ancient Egyptians. Personal dream records were also kept, though fewer have survived. A person might record their dreams on papyrus, on pottery shards, even on the walls of their homes. These weren't casual notations, but careful records, often including the date, the circumstances of the dream, and subsequent events that confirmed or contradicted the dream's message. The act of recording a dream was believed to help fix its meaning, to prevent it from being forgotten, to strengthen its prophetic power. The seasonal patterns of dreaming were recognized and documented. Certain times of year were considered more favorable for prophetic dreams. The period of the Nile's inundation, when the land was renewed, was particularly powerful for dreams of transformation and new beginnings. The time of harvest might bring dreams of completion, of judgment, of rewards and punishments. The desert season, hot and dry, might produce dreams of testing, of spiritual purification, of encounters with dangerous forces.
Festival nights had their own dream significance. The night of a major religious festival, when the gods were particularly present, when the veil between worlds was especially thin. These were times when significant dreams were expected. People might prepare specially for festival night dreams, fasting, purifying themselves, sleeping in temples or sacred spaces, hoping for divine communication. The 5 epigomenal days, those extra days added to the calendar to make it align with the solar year, were particularly charged with dream significance. These days existed outside the normal calendar, in a kind of temporal borderland, making them especially suitable for communication between worlds. Dreams during these days were taken very seriously, often interpreted as messages for the coming year, warnings or promises that would influence decisions for months to come. The geography of dreaming was mapped as carefully as the physical landscape. Certain places were known to produce particular kinds of dreams. Sleeping near the Nile might bring dreams of abundance and fertility. Sleeping in the desert might bring visions of spiritual testing or encounters with dangerous spirits. Sleeping in a tomb, something that tomb workers might occasionally do, was known to produce dreams of the dead, sometimes helpful, sometimes terrifying. Temple sleep had its own geography. Different temples specialized in different kinds of dreams. The Temple of Hathor at Dendera was known for dreams of love and marriage. The Temple of Thoth at Hermopolis was sought for dreams of wisdom and learning. The Serapeum at Saqqara, with its underground galleries, was famous for healing dreams. Pilgrims would travel great distances to sleep in particular temples, seeking specific kinds of divine communication. The preparation for temple sleep was elaborate and carefully prescribed. The dreamer might need to fast for days, abstaining not just from food, but from sexual activity, from strong emotions, from anything that might cloud the purity needed for divine contact. They would bathe repeatedly, in sacred water if possible, water from the temple's sacred lake or from the Nile at a particularly holy spot. The clothing worn for temple sleep was special. Clean white linen, the color of purity, free from any contamination. No leather, which was considered impure for sacred spaces, no colored dyes that might carry unwanted influences. The dreamer would appear before the god as pure as possible, a clean vessel ready to receive divine communication. The offerings made before temple sleep varied depending on the god and the request. For healing dreams, offerings might include models of the afflicted body part, small sculptures showing the disease or injury. For fertility dreams, offerings of eggs, seeds, images of pregnant women or nursing mothers. For dreams of guidance in legal matters, offerings of mott feathers, symbols of truth and justice. The offering created a connection between the dreamer and the divine, a reason for the god to pay attention, to respond. The actual experience of temple sleep was profound and often transformative. The atmosphere of the temple at night, the smell of incense so thick it seemed to have physical weight, the absolute darkness broken only by the faint glow of eternal flames, the knowledge that one was sleeping in the god's own house, all of this created a psychological state highly conducive to significant dreams. Not everyone who sought temple dreams received them. Sometimes the god remained silent, the night passed without visions, the dreamer awoke disappointed. This too required interpretation. Perhaps the dreamer wasn't properly purified. Perhaps the time wasn't right. Perhaps the god's silence was itself the message, indicating that the dreamer should not proceed with their plan, should wait, should reconsider. Even the absence of dreams was meaningful in the context of temple sleep. The dreams that did come in temples were vivid, overwhelming, unlike ordinary dreams. Dreamers reported seeing gods in their full divine forms, experiencing sensations beyond normal human perception, receiving complex information that they sometimes couldn't fully understand or remember upon waking. The temple priests were skilled at helping dreamers recover and interpret these experiences, using questioning techniques, symbolic frameworks, sometimes hypnotic methods, to help the dreamer recall details. The healing that occurred through temple dreams wasn't always direct. Sometimes the god would appear and touch the afflicted part, producing immediate healing, but more often, the dream would provide instructions, recipes for medicines, behavioral changes, spiritual practices that would lead to healing over time. The prescription might be complex,
involving dietary changes, prayers to specific gods, pilgrimages to other temples, offerings to be made on particular days. The social dynamics around temple dreaming were complex. Wealthy patrons might pay for poor people to undergo temple sleep on their behalf, believing that the pure and simple were more likely to receive divine communications. Professional dreamers, people known for their ability to receive and remember significant dreams, might be hired to dream for others. The interpretation of temple dreams might involve multiple priests, discussions, consultations of texts, divination procedures, before a final meaning was determined. The political implications of temple dreams could be enormous. A dream received in a major temple, interpreted by high-ranking priests, might influence royal policy, military strategy, agricultural planning. During times of crisis, the state might sponsor mass temple sleeping sessions, hundreds of people seeking dreams for guidance, their collected visions interpreted as divine direction for the nation. The relationship between temple dreams and medical practice was particularly close. Many healing temples had associated medical schools, where priest-physicians learned to combine divine revelation with empirical observation. The treatments prescribed in dreams would be compared with traditional remedies, modified based on outcomes, gradually incorporated into the medical canon. This integration of revealed and observed knowledge created a medical system that was both spiritual and practical.
The architectural design of dream chambers in temples shows careful consideration of the dreaming experience. The chambers were usually small, dark, womb-like. The acoustics might be designed to create subtle echoes, whispers that seem to come from nowhere, enhancing the sense of divine presence. The temperature was controlled, cool enough to require covering, promoting the deep sleep in which significant dreams occur. Some chambers had painted ceilings, images that would be the last thing the dreamer saw before sleeping, priming their unconscious for particular kinds of visions. The role of drugs in facilitating temple dreams is debated by scholars, but there's evidence that mild psychoactive substances were sometimes used. Blue lotus, with its mild sedative and euphoric properties, was certainly associated with dreaming. Preparations from the mandrake plant, carefully dosed, might have been used for particularly important dream sessions. These weren't recreational drugs, but sacred substances, used under strict priestly supervision, part of the technology of divine communication. The morning after temple sleep was crucial. The dreamer would be gently awakened, encouraged to lie still and recall their dreams before moving or speaking. A scribe might be present to record the dream immediately, before details were lost. The dreamer might be questioned, asked to describe not just what they saw, but what they felt, what they heard, what they smelled. Every detail could be significant, requiring careful recording and analysis. The payment for temple dream services varied widely. The poor might offer simple gifts, a loaf of bread, a small amulet, their labor in temple maintenance. The wealthy would pay in gold, in land donations, in elaborate votive offerings. But payment wasn't always material. Someone whose dream led to healing might serve the temple for a period, spreading word of the god's power, bringing other seekers. The economy of temple dreaming was complex, involving material, social, and spiritual exchanges. The home remedies for sleep problems show the integration of practical and magical approaches in everyday life. For insomnia, a mixture of lettuce seeds and beer might be prescribed. The lettuce for its sedative properties, the beer for its relaxing effects. But the mixture would be activated with spoken spells, charged with magical power. The bed might be sprinkled with water in which certain plants had been steeped, plants known to promote sleep, but also believed to repel evil spirits. For children who resisted bedtime, parents had various strategies. Stories of children who didn't sleep properly and suffered consequences, encounters with night demons, transformation into animals, separation from their families. But also positive stories. Children who slept well and received wonderful dreams, visits from benevolent gods, visions of their future greatness.
The bedtime story tradition was strong in ancient Egypt, using narrative to prepare children psychologically for sleep. Lullabies were an important part of children's bedtime routines. These weren't just soothing melodies, but often contained protective spells, repeated phrases that created magical barriers around the sleeping child. Sleep, sleep, my little one. Bes stands guard at your head, Taweret at your feet. The 7 Hathors sing you to rest. No evil thing can enter here. Sleep, sleep, my little one. The rhythm, the repetition, the invocation of protective deities all combine to create both psychological comfort and spiritual protection. The treatment of sleepwalking shows interesting medical understanding. The Egyptians recognized that sleepwalkers shouldn't be suddenly awakened, that they should be gently guided back to bed. But they also believed sleepwalking indicated that the Ba was having difficulty separating from the body, that the normal sleep journey was disrupted. Treatment might involve rituals to strengthen the distinction between Ba and body, to facilitate proper separation during sleep. Snoring was recognized as both a medical and social problem. Remedies included sleeping position changes, dietary modifications, and herbal preparations to clear breathing passages. But snoring was considered potentially dangerous. The loud noise might attract evil spirits, disturb protective deities, create vulnerability for the entire household. A chronic snorer might need special protective amulets, additional bedroom guardians, more powerful defensive spells. The elderly had their own sleep concerns and practices. As people aged, they were believed to move closer to the realm of the dead, their sleep becoming deeper, their dreams more likely to involve deceased relatives. Special precautions were taken to ensure elderly people didn't slip too far into the death realm during sleep. Stronger anchoring spells, more powerful protective amulets, family members checking on them during the night. The sleep of pregnant women was surrounded by particular concerns and protections. The growing child was vulnerable to spiritual attack. Jealous spirits might try to harm the baby. Evil magic might be directed at the pregnant woman. The bedroom of an expectant mother would be thoroughly protected. Images of Taweret prominent. Special amulets placed around the bed. Protective spells renewed daily. Her dreams were carefully monitored, interpreted for signs about the baby's health, its sex, its future destiny. The first night after birth was especially critical. The newborn, fresh from the womb, was not yet fully anchored in the physical world. The mother, exhausted from labor, was spiritually vulnerable. Special watches would be kept, family members taking turns staying awake, maintaining protective spells, watching for any signs of supernatural interference. The 7 Hathors, goddesses of fate, were believed to visit newborns in their first sleep, determining their destiny. Everything possible was done to ensure this visitation was favorable. The dreams of new mothers were particularly significant. A dream in the first nights after birth might reveal the child's future, warn of health problems, indicate which gods would be the child's particular protectors. These dreams would be carefully interpreted, often by specialists in birth-related dream reading, and might influence how the child was raised, what name they were given, what profession they were directed towards.
The sleep arrangements for infants show practical wisdom combined with spiritual protection. Babies might sleep in special baskets, woven with protective symbols, placed where parents could easily check on them. The baby's sleeping area would be surrounded by protective objects, amulets, small statues of protective deities, written spells. But there was also understanding of practical needs, the importance of proper positioning to prevent suffocation, the need for appropriate warmth, the value of consistent sleeping schedules. The weaning process included changes in sleeping arrangements. A child who had slept with their mother might be moved to their own bed, a significant transition requiring both practical and spiritual support. New protective amulets appropriate for an older child, different bedroom decorations, modified bedtime rituals. The child's first night in their own bed was a rite of passage,
marked by special ceremonies, prayers for protection, gifts to encourage brave, independent sleeping. The gendered aspects of sleep and bedroom arrangements reflected broader social structures. In wealthy households, husbands and wives might have separate bedrooms, coming together for intimacy but maintaining independent sleeping spaces. This arrangement had practical benefits. Different sleep schedules could be accommodated, snoring or restlessness wouldn't disturb the partner, but it also had spiritual dimensions. Each person's spiritual journey during sleep was individual, requiring personalized protection and space. The servant sleeping arrangements in wealthy households show class distinctions, but also practical considerations. Servants might sleep in simple quarters, perhaps just reed mats in storerooms or kitchens. But those who attended children or elderly family members might sleep nearby, ready to respond to nighttime needs. Their sleep was lighter, more interrupted, but still protected by household gods, still requiring basic spiritual safeguards. The sleep of soldiers and guards presented unique challenges. Those on night watch needed to stay alert, fighting the natural urge to sleep. Special preparations, stimulating herbs, cold water splashes, walking circuits helped maintain wakefulness. But even guards needed sleep eventually, and their sleeping quarters would be protected with military-specific deities, Montu, the war god, protective spells against enemy magic, amulets for vigilance, even in sleep. Travelers faced particular challenges regarding sleep. Away from home, without familiar protections, in places where local spirits might be hostile, travel sleep was dangerous. Portable protections were essential. Travel amulets, small images of protective gods, written spells that could be placed around temporary sleeping spaces. Caravanserais and inns would have communal sleeping areas, requiring negotiation of space, trust in strangers, additional protective measures. The river sailors who worked the Nile had their own sleep traditions. Sleeping on a boat with the constant motion of water, the sounds of the river at night, the proximity to Sobek's crocodiles and the river's other dangers required special adaptations. Boat cabins would be protected with specific river deities. Khnum, who controlled the Nile's flow, Hapi, who brought the inundation. Dreams received while sleeping on the river were considered particularly significant, the flowing water facilitating communication between worlds. Desert travelers, crossing the vast expanses between oases, faced extreme challenges. Sleeping in the open desert, exposed to scorpions and snakes, vulnerable to desert demons, required maximum protection. The group would sleep in a circle, feet toward the center, heads outward, creating a human mandala of protection. Desert sleep was often fitful. The extreme temperature changes, the unfamiliar sounds, the constant vigilance against danger, all disrupting normal rest patterns. Miners and quarry workers who sometimes spent weeks away from home developed their own sleeping traditions. Deep in the earth, in the realm of the earth god Geb, sleep took on different qualities. Dreams in the depths were often intense, sometimes prophetic, sometimes disturbing. Special offerings to Geb and Ptah, god of craftsmen, were essential. The sleeping quarters at mining sites would be carefully protected, both against cave-ins and against the spirits of the earth that might be disturbed by the mining. The festival times brought changes to normal sleeping patterns. During major celebrations, people might stay awake all night, participating in processions, watching mystery plays, joining communal celebrations. The normal boundaries between day and night activities were suspended. But even during festivals, certain hours were reserved for rest, and the protections for this festival sleep were especially important. Evil forces might take advantage of the general disorder to attack the vulnerable. The month of Khoiak, when the mysteries of Osiris was celebrated, was particularly significant for sleep and dreams. This was the time when the veil between life and death was thinnest,
when dreams of the deceased were most common, when prophetic visions were most likely. Many people would engage in special dream practices during Koyak, seeking communication with deceased relatives, answers to important questions, visions of the coming year. The New Year period, coinciding with the Nile's inundation, brought its own sleep traditions. Dreams on New Year's Eve were especially significant, potentially prophetic for the entire coming year. People would prepare carefully for these dreams, purifying themselves, making special offerings, sleeping with particular objects under their headrests to influence their dreams. The first dream of the new year was carefully interpreted, setting the tone for the months ahead. The agricultural cycle influenced sleeping patterns profoundly. During planting and harvest, sleep might be minimal, every hour of daylight precious for fieldwork. Quick naps in the heat of the day, brief rests at night, the minimum sleep necessary for survival. But during the quieter seasons, when the fields were fallow, sleep could be longer, more luxurious, more attention paid to dreams and their meanings. The relationship between sleep and artistic creation was recognized and cultivated. Artists and craftsmen would sometimes seek dreams for inspiration, sleeping in their workshops, surrounded by their tools and materials, hoping for visions of completed works, divine inspiration for their creations. The god Pata, patron of craftsmen, was particularly invoked for creative dreams. A sculptor might sleep with a piece of stone under his headrest, a painter with pigments near their bed, creating sympathetic connections to encourage relevant dreams.
Musicians had their own relationship with sleep and dreams. The goddess Hathor, patroness of music, might send dreams of new melodies, innovative rhythms, words for songs. Temple musicians would sometimes engage in dream incubation, specifically seeking new hymns, new ways to praise the gods. The sistrum, Hathor's sacred rattle, might be placed near the bed to encourage musical dreams. The interpretation of sounds heard in dreams was a specialized aspect of dream reading. Unlike visual dreams, which could be compared to standard symbols, auditory dreams were more subjective, harder to categorize. The voice of a god might be recognized by its quality: thunderous for Amun, sweet for Hathor, whispering for Thoth. But human voices, animal sounds, music, environmental noises all required careful analysis, consideration of the dreamer's personal associations, the context of the dream. Colors in dreams had specific meanings in the Egyptian system. Gold indicated divinity, divine favor, eternal life. Red might mean danger, chaos, Seth's influence, but also life force, power, protection. Blue suggested the heavens, the primordial waters, fertility, renewal. Green meant growth, regeneration, Osiris's power, the fields of the afterlife. Black could be positive, the fertile soil of Egypt, regeneration, or negative, the darkness of the underworld, evil forces. The interpretation depended on context, on the dreamer's emotional response, on other elements in the dream. The numbers appearing in dreams were significant. 3 represented plurality, completeness, the basic family unit. 4 indicated totality, the 4 cardinal directions, complete coverage. 7 was magical, protective, the 7 Hathors, the 7 sacred oils. Dreams featuring specific numbers would be interpreted partly through numerological analysis, the number providing a key to the dream's meaning. Animals in dreams each carried specific meanings. The appearance of a lion might indicate royal favor or danger from authority. A crocodile could represent Sobek's power, danger from water, hidden threats. Birds often indicated messages, the Ba's flight, freedom or escape. Snakes were complex, potentially representing evil, danger, but also protection, regeneration, divine power. The behavior of the animal, its color, its interaction with the dreamer, all modified the basic interpretation. The recurring dream was taken very seriously. A dream that repeated night after night or returned periodically was considered an urgent message requiring immediate attention. The dreamer might need to undergo special purification, make specific offerings, change their behavior in particular ways. Ignoring a recurring dream was dangerous. The gods didn't repeat themselves without reason, and continued neglect might provoke divine anger. The shared dream, when multiple people reported similar or identical dreams, was considered especially significant. This might occur during temple sleep, when several suppliants received the same message, or in a community, when many people dreamed of the same event or symbol. Shared dreams might indicate communal danger, required collective action, or divine communication meant for the entire group rather than individuals. The prophetic dream that came true enhanced the dreamer's reputation, validated the interpretation system, reinforced belief in divine communication. These successful prophecies would be remembered, recorded, cited as evidence of the gods' care for humanity. But failed prophecies required explanation too. Perhaps the interpretation was wrong. Perhaps human action had changed the predicted outcome. Perhaps the timing was different than expected. The false dream, sent by evil spirits to deceive, was a recognized danger. Certain signs might indicate a false dream: internal inconsistency, feelings of unease or contamination upon waking, symbols that didn't match traditional interpretations. Protection against false dreams was part of bedroom defense. Spells specifically requesting true dreams, amulets that filtered out deception, invocations of gods known for truth-telling. The lucid dream, where the dreamer knew they were dreaming, was understood as a special state of consciousness. This awareness might allow communication with gods on more equal terms, the ability to ask questions, to request clarification, to navigate the dream world consciously. Techniques for achieving lucidity were taught in some temples: meditation practices, breathing exercises, mental preparations that increased the likelihood of conscious dreaming. The teaching of dream interpretation was formalized in some temple schools. Students would study the classic dream texts, learn the symbol systems, practice interpretation on recorded dreams. They would also develop their intuitive abilities, learning to read the dreamer as well as the dream, to understand personal symbolism, to recognize when standard interpretations didn't apply. The best dream interpreters combined scholarly knowledge with psychological insight, spiritual sensitivity with practical wisdom. The economic value of dream knowledge created a market for dream books, portable papyri with common dreams and their meanings. These might be simple lists for everyday use or elaborate texts for professional interpreters. The production and sale of these texts was a specialized trade: scribes who understood dream symbolism, artists who could illustrate dream scenarios, merchants who distributed the texts throughout Egypt and beyond. The export of Egyptian dream wisdom influenced other cultures throughout the ancient world. The Greeks and Roman writers acknowledged Egyptian expertise in dream interpretation. The Babylonians and Assyrians incorporated Egyptian dream symbols into their own systems. The Hebrew tradition shows Egyptian influence in its understanding of dreams. This cultural transmission carried Egyptian ideas about sleep and dreams throughout the Mediterranean world. As we contemplate these ancient practices, these elaborate systems of belief and behavior surrounding sleep, we might recognize elements that resonate with our own experiences. The vulnerability of sleep, the mystery of dreams, the desire for protection and understanding. These are universal human concerns that transcend time and culture. The Egyptians developed sophisticated responses to these concerns, combining practical wisdom with spiritual belief, empirical observation with mythological understanding. Their conception of sleep as a journey,
a temporary separation of spiritual and physical selves, might seem foreign to us. But don't we sometimes feel that disconnection, that sense of returning from somewhere else when we wake? Their belief in prophetic dreams might seem superstitious, but don't we sometimes wake with inexplicable certainty about something? A solution to a problem, a warning about a situation, insight that seems to come from beyond our conscious mind?
The protective rituals surrounding Egyptian sleep might appear excessive, all those amulets and spells and divine invocations. But don't we have our own bedtime rituals? Our own ways of creating safety and comfort as we prepare for sleep? The locked doors, the checked windows, the night lights for children, the white noise machines, the meditation apps. Aren't these our modern versions of protection against the vulnerabilities of night? The Egyptian understanding of the bedroom as sacred space, carefully oriented, properly decorated, spiritually protected. This might inform our own relationship with our sleeping spaces. Perhaps we too could benefit from more intentional bedroom arrangements, from considering not just the practical, but the psychological and even spiritual dimensions of where and how we sleep. The integration of physical and spiritual approaches to sleep problems, combining herbal remedies with protective magic, practical solutions with ritual practices, this holistic understanding might offer insights for our own sleep challenges. While we might not invoke Bes or wear protective amulets, we might recognize the value of addressing sleep issues from multiple angles, considering not just the physical, but the mental, emotional, even spiritual dimensions of rest. The Egyptian dream interpretation, the social dimension of dreaming, the collective meaning-making process, this social dimension of dreaming is largely lost in our individualistic culture. But perhaps there's value in discussing our dreams, in seeking others' perspectives, in recognizing that our nighttime experiences might have significance beyond our personal psychology. The Egyptian reverence for sleep, their understanding of it as a sacred state, requiring preparation and protection, might inspire us to approach our own sleep with more respect. In our productivity-obsessed culture, sleep is often seen as an unfortunate necessity, time stolen from more important activities. But the Egyptians understood sleep as essential, valuable, a time when important things happened, when the soul was renewed, when divine communication was possible. As the night deepens around us, as we prepare for our own journey into sleep, we might carry with us some wisdom from ancient Egypt. The understanding that sleep is transition, transformation, temporary transcendence. The recognition that dreams might carry meaning, whether psychological or spiritual, personal or collective. The awareness that how we prepare for sleep, how we arrange our sleeping spaces, how we transition from waking to sleeping, all of these matter more than we might think. The ancient Egyptians have long since made their final journey to the west, to the realm of Osiris, to the eternal sleep from which there is no waking. Their civilization, which seemed eternal to them, has passed into history, into memory, into the dreams of humanity. But their understanding of sleep and dreams, recorded on papyrus, carved in stone, painted on tomb walls, preserved in the dry desert air, continues to speak to us across the millennia. Their beds have crumbled, their headrests are in museums, their protective amulets are displayed in cases, no longer worn by sleeping children. But the human experiences they were designed to address, the vulnerability of sleep, the mystery of dreams, the desire for rest and renewal, these remain constant. We are not so different from those ancient sleepers along the Nile. We share the same needs, the same fears, the same hopes for peaceful rest and meaningful dreams. The Nile still flows, though the ancient Egyptians wouldn't recognize its modern, controlled flow. The Aswan Dam replacing the natural inundation, electric lights illuminating what was once surrendered to darkness. But somewhere along its banks, in the villages that still follow ancient rhythms, people prepare for sleep in ways their ancestors would recognize.
Simple protections, quiet prayers, the gathering of families as darkness falls, the gentle transition from day to night that humans have always known. The gods of ancient Egypt no longer receive offerings in great temples. Their statues stand silent in museums, their names known only to scholars and enthusiasts. But the human impulses that created them, the desire for protection, for understanding, for connection with something greater than ourselves, these persist. We might not invoke Bes or wear protective amulets, but we have our own ways of seeking safety in the vulnerable hours of sleep, our own rituals of protection and preparation. As we drift toward our own sleep, our own nightly journey into that mysterious realm, we might appreciate the continuity of human experience that connects us to those ancient dreamers. The same stars that watched over their sleep watch over ours, though we rarely see them through the veil of artificial light. The same biological rhythms that governed their rest govern ours, though we often override them with artificial schedules. The same capacity for dreams, for those strange nocturnal adventures of consciousness, remains within us, waiting each night to transport us beyond the boundaries of waking reality. The Egyptian conception of sleep as temporary death and daily rebirth, this cyclic understanding of consciousness might offer us a different perspective on our own nightly rest. Each evening, we release the day's concerns, surrender control, trust in the continuation of existence without our conscious participation. Each morning, we return, renewed, potentially transformed by the night's experiences, ready to engage with the world again. This daily cycle of dissolution and reconstitution, of surrender and return, mirrors larger cycles of existence that the Egyptians understood so well. Their belief that the soul traveled during sleep, visiting other realms, receiving messages, experiencing realities beyond the physical, this might be metaphor for the profound psychological processes that occur during sleep. The consolidation of memory, the processing of emotions, the creative problem-solving that happens below the threshold of consciousness, these are our modern understanding of sleep's journey, different in language, but perhaps not so different in essence, from the Egyptian conception.
The protective deities of Egyptian bedrooms, Bes with his fierce face, Taweret with her maternal bulk, these might seem like primitive superstitions, but don't they represent eternally valid concerns? The desire for protection during vulnerability, the need for maternal comfort, the wish for fierce guardians against the dangers of night? We might not paint their images on our walls, but we have our own symbols of protection and comfort, our own ways of creating psychological safety as we prepare for sleep. The Egyptian practice of dream incubation, deliberately seeking divine dreams through ritual preparation, this might seem foreign to our secular age, but don't we sometimes go to sleep with specific questions, hoping for insight, for solutions, for clarity that seems to come from beyond our conscious mind? The techniques might differ. We might use intention setting rather than temple rituals, but the underlying belief in sleep's potential for revelation persists. As we settle into our own beds, so different from the wooden frames and hard headrests of ancient Egypt, we might nonetheless appreciate the continuity of the human experience of preparing for rest. The checking of locks, the adjustment of pillows, the settling into a comfortable position, these are our rituals, our preparations for the vulnerable journey of sleep. We might not speak protective spells, but perhaps we have our own mental rituals, reviewing the day, setting intentions for tomorrow, releasing worries, inviting peaceful rest. The darkness that surrounds us as we prepare for sleep is not the complete darkness known to the ancient Egyptians. Our nights are illuminated by streetlights, by the glow of electronic devices, by the ambient light of civilization. We've lost something in this conquest of darkness, the profound quiet, the complete rest for our visual sense, the invitation to inner experience that total darkness provides. Perhaps the Egyptians' acceptance of darkness, their integration of it into daily life, offers a wisdom we might reconsider.
Their understanding of different types of dreams, ordinary versus significant, divine messages versus mental processing. This sophisticated categorization might inform our own relationship with our dreams. We tend to dismiss dreams as meaningless, random neural firing, or alternatively to overinterpret them, seeing significance in every detail. The Egyptian middle path, recognizing that some dreams matter more than others, that interpretation requires wisdom and experience, might offer a more balanced approach. The communal nature of Egyptian dream interpretation, the sharing within families, the consultation with specialists, the collective meaning-making, this social dimension enriched their understanding of dreams. Our dreams have become private, often unshared, interpreted, if at all, through individual psychology. Perhaps there's value in the Egyptian approach, in recognizing that our dreams might speak not just to personal concerns, but to collective experiences, shared symbols, communal meanings. As sleep begins to claim us, as consciousness begins to dissolve into that mysterious state, we might appreciate the universality of this experience. Every human who has ever lived has known this moment, this surrender, this trust in sleep's restoration. The ancient Egyptians, with their elaborate protections and profound beliefs, were engaging with the same fundamental mystery we face each night, the temporary dissolution of conscious self, the trust that we will reconstitute in the morning. Their prayers to Ra, asking for safe passage through the night, for reunion with the soul at dawn. These might seem primitive superstitions, but aren't they addressing real concerns? The vulnerability of unconsciousness, the mystery of where we go when we sleep, the relief and gratitude of waking safely? We might not frame these concerns in religious terms, but they remain part of the human experience of sleep. The Egyptian bedroom, with its protective symbols, its careful orientation, its spiritual significance, was a sacred space dedicated to the profound activity of sleep. Our bedrooms might benefit from similar consideration, not necessarily with religious imagery, but with attention to what makes a space truly restful, truly safe, truly conducive to the deep rest our bodies and minds require. As we drift deeper towards sleep, as the boundaries of consciousness begin to soften, we might carry with us some essence of Egyptian wisdom about this state we're entering. The recognition that sleep is not just physical rest, but something more, a time when different aspects of our being are active, when processing and integration occur, when we touch something beyond ordinary waking consciousness. The headrest of the ancient Egyptian, that hard curved support that seems so uncomfortable to us, was designed to cradle the head in a specific position, to maintain alignment, to create a physical foundation for the soul's journey. Our soft pillows serve a different function, prioritizing comfort over position. But perhaps there's wisdom in considering how our physical position affects our sleep, our dreams, our nightly journey through unconsciousness. The Egyptian integration of practical and spiritual approaches to sleep, combining physical comfort with metaphysical protection, medical knowledge with religious belief. This holistic understanding might offer insights for our own time. We tend to separate these dimensions, addressing sleep problems as purely medical issues, or purely psychological issues, or purely spiritual issues. The Egyptian example suggests that all these dimensions are interrelated, that optimal sleep might require attention to all of them. As the last thoughts of the day dissolve into the approaching unconsciousness of sleep, as we make that transition the Egyptians understood as the Bes separation from the body, we join an unbroken chain of human experience stretching back to the beginning of consciousness itself. Every human has known this moment, this surrender, this trust in sleep's restoration. The ancient Egyptians have been sleeping their eternal sleep for millennia, their bodies carefully preserved, waiting for a resurrection that their religion promised. But their understanding of sleep and dreams lives on, preserved in papyri, carved in stone, painted on walls, transmitted through cultures,
interpreted by scholars, contemplated by anyone who wonders about the mystery of sleep.
We are their inheritors in more ways than we might realize. Our DNA carrying the legacy of ancient ancestors. Our cultures influenced by Egyptian wisdom transmitted through Greece and Rome. Our dreams perhaps containing symbols and patterns first identified by Egyptian interpreters thousands of years ago. When we sleep, we join them in that timeless experience, that daily journey into mystery, that universal human adventure of unconsciousness and dreams. The Nile continues its eternal flow, though dammed and controlled, no longer flooding and receding with the ancient rhythm. The pyramids still point toward the stars, though the stars have shifted in their positions over the millennia. The temples stand empty of worshippers, their gods receiving no offerings, their dream chambers silent. But the human experience they were built to address, the need for meaning, for protection, for understanding, for connection with something greater, this continues. In our modern bedrooms, surrounded by technology the Egyptians couldn't have imagined, we still face the same nightly transition they knew, the release of consciousness, the vulnerability of sleep, the mystery of dreams, the gratitude of waking. We might not have their elaborate protections, their divine guardians, their sophisticated dream interpretation systems, but we share their fundamental humanity, their need for rest, their capacity for dreams, their daily journey through the cycle of sleeping and waking. As sleep finally claims us, as we make that transition from waking to sleeping that billions have made before us, we might feel a connection to those ancient sleepers along the Nile. They too knew this moment, this surrender, this trust. They too closed their eyes each night hoping for peaceful rest, meaningful dreams, safe return to consciousness. They too understood sleep as something profound, necessary, mysterious, sacred. The last conscious thought fades. The breathing deepens and slows. The muscles relax completely, and we enter that realm the Egyptians knew so well, the kingdom of sleep, where the Ba flies free, where gods might speak, where the soul is renewed for another day. The protective deities they invoked, Bes and Taweret, Ra and Thoth, might no longer watch over us in the forms they imagined, but whatever forces guard our sleep, whatever processes restore us during the night, whatever meanings our dreams might carry, these continue their ancient work. Rest now, as they rested, trusting in the night's restoration, in the morning's return, in the eternal cycle of sleeping and waking that connects all humanity across time and space. The wisdom of ancient Egypt regarding sleep and dreams, accumulated over millennia, tested by millions of dreamers, refined by countless priests and interpreters, offers its gentle guidance even now, even here, as we make our own journey through the night. The Egyptian understanding of sleep as sacred time, dreams as potential communication, the bedroom as spiritual space, the soul's nightly journey, all of this wisdom whispers across the centuries, suggesting that our nightly rest might be more than we imagine, more than mere biological necessity, more than simple unconsciousness. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps sleep is indeed a journey, a transformation, a daily adventure into mystery that deserves our respect, our preparation, our gratitude. And so we sleep, as humans have always slept, vulnerable yet protected, unconscious yet somehow aware, separated yet connected, dying the little death that is sleep, trusting in the morning's resurrection, the return of consciousness, the reunion of all the parts of ourselves that separate during the night. The ancient Egyptians understood this process in their own terms. We understand it in ours. But the fundamental experience remains the same, the eternal human rhythm of sleeping and waking, the daily journey through darkness into light.